Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Coming up on this show,
I was able to take out a few paddocks for silage. We got a third cut as well recently there, which averaged nearly 10 bales to the acre.
Things are improving after the drought for participants in the Better Farm programme. And
the U.S. is not seeking anything other than free, fair and reciprocal trade. And so the farmers and the ag community is very much in support of the president trying to, in my words, right-size this.
The man in charge of agricultural trade in the Trump White House defends the aggressive U.S. position. We meet him at the Agricultural Science Association Conference. But first, let's hear from this year's FBD Young Farmer of the Year, who was announced on Tuesday. My colleague Odile Evans was at the ceremony in Dublin, and she sat down with the winner, County Monaghan dry stock farmer Daniel Hawthorne.
Went to DCU, studied mechanical engineering, didn't like it because I was away from the farm all the time. It wasn't for me, and I come back home. I done my welding certs and was took on as employment in Combi Lift. Then it was the farm enterprise. I started off probably when I was about 16 or so. Dad bought me some Angus heifers to rear as cows, and well, there would be progeny if all them cattle probably still come through the farm, but none of them would be existing on the farm now. Went Aberdeen Angus route because I was young and probably wasn't just as clued in as some people would have been, so I easy calving, easy finished, and then it just happened that I just built stock numbers up from there. With the land bank that we're farming, the cattle numbers and satin for silage were still surplus grass after silage, so and safe building sheds and getting into beef. I thought I entered the store lamb business. I am handling probably around 400 store lambs, and between my own ewes and lambs probably killing about 500 lambs a year, and making as much use of the grass.
How long would you have them for on farm?
Well, my own lambs born mid-March would be creeped, be killed 120, 150 days in around that. All gone from mid-July anyway. And then start buying in-store lambs from July on. About 300 bought in so far as of yet, and I sort of be wheeling through them probably from mid-September now on, probably be trying to get a load away most weeks.
And do you manage that between yourselves,
all
of that?
Manage all that, and
you keep the job going and all of that. Yeah. So that must be intense,
It is. There's not much free time, but we'll hopefully going forward with the poultry unit, employment will.
So you're going to the poultry unit now. You've built a shed. Have you got the birds in there?
No, birds aren't coming.
Right. Okay. So when are you expecting to get that kicked off?
Well, probably late October, beginning of November.
So you're at a really exciting time on your farm.
That's what I said to Kieran whenever he was putting me forward for this, that I wanted to leave it till my unit was up and running, but so he was fairly happy that I went for it now. I thought it would have been better when it was up and running as opposed to in the construction phase
So have you had experience in poultry before?
Yeah, a neighbour farmer built one, I suppose about a year and a half, 18 months ago. And he was looking for off-farm help on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday mornings, give him a hand, to give him a bit of spare time. So I have been working along with him. So
Kieran put you forward for this, and you thought, I'll leave it for another year or whatever. How did you get on during the interviews? What was your reaction to the questions and things?
Well, some of the questions was very intense, but because I'm only in the beginning of building my poultry unit, the facts and figures, everything was fresh in my head. I knew the whole ins and outs. I wouldn't be building the unit that I'm building unless I knew exactly what I was letting myself in for. So it probably maybe all the better that everything was really fresh in my head, that I was fit to get all the efficiencies and everything out to them as they needed them.
It's an interesting thing because a lot of the time over the last number of years the winners have been traditionally from almost dairy farms, you could almost say. They've all been quite full-time farmers, really far progressed in their career. This is a chance, I suppose, for you to represent the ordinary farmer who's got the job going as well. How do you feel about that?
I'm totally overwhelmed to have received this award, and I never actually dreamt of it coming home to Monaghan. Be up against some of the dairy farmers, the calibre of the farms that they're farming. It's a massive achievement to receive this award. Every man's situation is different, but definitely don't doubt yourself. I was doubting myself when I was first coming forward, but I'm quite happy now that I've come through all this.
So introduce us to your father here.
Dad, Edward.
Oh yeah. You took a big plunge setting them up at 18.
Daniel went to DCU to study engineering, and it wasn't for him. And about 20 days into his course, he texted and said, "Daddy, I don't think I like this." And we came home, and we had a power. Now, he was farming a lot he had a great interest in the farming. So we decided then that if that was his desire and he was going to give it up, would go for it and let him do the farming. And he was 100% enthusiastic about it. And we knew exactly, he farmed for a while. He found out then that you're going to have to get a second job. If you've got suckler cows and sheep, you have to get a second job, hence his job in combi lift. And then to roll it on to the future now, if his chicken or hen enterprise were to go, combi lift are a great employer, and they may be able to allow him to work maybe 2 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever to accommodate him. But his main ambition is to be able to sustain the farm and stay on the farm. I've had some serious health problems, and it was important that somebody young and fresh and was able to do that. So you know what I mean. So that would have added to the decisions as well.
You were able to take a step back.
I was able to take a step back, and as such, hopefully I've more of an operation to have in the future. But hopefully everything will pan out. And also he has been doing this competition when there's been that hanging over his head as well, which shows a great strength of character as well.
Now let's take a look back at the Agricultural Science Association's annual conference last Friday. Agri-food exporters are suspended to the risk of a trade war after US President Donald Trump started an escalation of tariffs earlier this year. And the keynote speaker at the ASA Conference was the man in charge of agricultural trade in Washington. Irish Farmers Journal market specialist Phelim O'Neill caught up with Under Secretary Ted McKinney, and he asked him if he defends the current US position.
Oh, yes. If you're speaking of seeking free, fair, and reciprocal trade, yes, I'll defend it 24/7 and twice more on Sunday. The U.S. is not seeking anything other than free, fair, and reciprocal trade. And for the last 20 years, a lot of reasons, a lot of them sanitary, phytosanitary, non-tariff trade barriers have entered in. And so the farmers and the ag community is very much in support of the president trying to, in my words, right-size this. But once that's done, fantastic. Let's get on with good, free, fair, and reciprocal trade.
But I suppose looking at this from the European perspective, and there are different, I suppose, rules of production that European farmers have to adhere to, and that's the way it is. We look at the US, and you would, in our opinion, looking at the cost of your farm bill, have a fairly heavily supported agriculture sector as well.
Well, I've got to go back and do the numbers. I'm not sure I agree with that. We got rid of a lot of what you and I and all of us call subsidies in the 1996 Farm Bill. Now, we have an insurance program that is on its way toward being self-funded. That's the goal, at least. There are programs that help with environmental stewardship and all that. Now, remember, the school nutrition program is 80% of our farm bill. And that's strictly the food stamp type programs that help address the hungry.
But would you not accept that's a de facto market support system? You're buying food of American farmers to circulate amongst, admittedly, the poorer sectors of society, but it is a very, very solid market support system for farmers.
But at a very small level, relatively speaking. I mean, your question makes it sound like that's the totality, and there is that very modestly, but those buys are a pittance compared to the whole budget. So we do support those in need, those who go to food banks, for example, some on school nutrition assistance, you bet, no different than others. But in comparison to the total budget, it is a very small portion, sir.
It's interesting, I suppose, in the environment of the Agricultural Science Association conference today. You will recall, of course, that the USA successfully took Europe to WTO on the issue of use of hormones in beef production.
Right.
That has come round again recently. The solution to that at the time was the creation of this high-quality beef tariff. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the detail. And just this week now, the European Commission has said that they're going to engage in discussion with you on that. It's a 45,000-tonne quota, and I know the USA grievance was very much around how your share of that has diminished over the years.
Right.
What is the level of that 45,000 tonne that you think would be fair for the USA?
Sure. Well, I think it's been reached. I don't know exactly what that arrived at, because that's largely a U.S. Trade Rep's office to EU Commission. But I would think the majority, because that was really designated for the U.S. and rightfully or wrongfully, 3, 4, 5 other countries got in there. So we're not seeking something that's unfair. The decision was made specific to a U.S. grievance, and the WTO agreed with it. So we believe this is the right thing to happen, and it's coming to the point where it should have been several years ago.
Also at the ASA conference, our agribusiness reporter, Larkin Allen, met Jason Hawkins, the chief executive of the Carberry Group of Westcourt Co-ops, and he asked him for his views on milk prices in the coming months.
Larkin, I think as we look at our markets and the supply-demand dynamic right now, I'd be optimistic that, hopefully the markets will stay firm in terms of where they are today, and that will continue through the end of the year, which, hopefully resulting in a milk price that's, similar to today rather than, going backwards.
Yeah, and I suppose dairy fats have been very strong this year. That's been the real story. I mean, where's the powder markets? Have you seen any change there? Is it still weak enough?
It's still weak enough. I mean, certainly, from fresh powders, obviously, is getting better price than maybe the intervention and so on, overhanging all of the market. So I think there's a slight improvement, but they're certainly, by historical standards, very weak.
Okay. Obviously, it was a very difficult summer in terms of weather for farmers. I mean, where has Carberry's milk supply been this year? Is it up or down, or how's it been?
Yeah, through July we were pretty much flat, maybe up 0.5%. In the last number of weeks we've actually seen quite a big uptick year on year. We'll probably expect to see at the end of the year, up by approximately 1% or so.
And to end with the ASA conference, let's hear from John Roach, an advisor to the Ministry of Primary Industries in New Zealand, which includes agriculture. He told Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Barry Cassidy how to deal with anti-farming propaganda.
So, propaganda is where the truth is used loosely. So information is used inappropriately, or it's used in a very specialised way, not taking the full meaning of that information into account. So from an agricultural point of view, it's where people take a small snippet of information and use it to say that something that we're doing is not appropriate.
I suppose it's something that's been going on for a millennium, as you pointed out. It's not something that's new. And maybe I think the focus has shifted too much towards a digital age, rather this has been going on for quite some time now.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the digital age has made it more easy, but as I said, the first recorded incidents of propaganda, or what we'd regard as propaganda, was back in Iran 500 years before Christ, when Darius the Great instructed his soldiers to carve his version of history into a wall in 3 different languages. So there was no excuse that anyone could not understand exactly how good he was. And we've seen evidence of that all the way through history, right through to the current era. The difference is, historically, propaganda was led by people that controlled the media channels. Now everybody's got their own media channel, so everybody can fuel their own propaganda.
I suppose the one interesting point you made was there's a difference between people talking about educating and engaging.
There is. I mean, education in itself is the provision of information, and there's no shortage of information, and people aren't necessarily interested in hearing what you know. they're interested in understanding, do you actually care about them, and then they trust you and they're willing to accept the information that you have. So that's about engaging them. So in the agricultural sector and the scientific sector in general, we've had this belief that if we just provide them with the information, that's all we have to do. That's what extension is. But instead of extension, what we're trying to do is get adoption. So we have to get them to believe that we actually do have their best interests at heart, that we do have the best interests of our animals at heart, that we do have the best interests of their food safety at heart. And from there, if they trust us and we can maintain that trust, that's the other thing we need to be careful that we don't do anything to break that trust, then I think we have consumers for life.
Yeah, because you showed us a fascinating study there where uneducated consumers were educated in Canadian dairy and actually were responsible for a loss of confidence in industry. So I suppose what you're saying is maybe engaging concerns rather than a whole-scale education.
Exactly, that's right. So that Canadian study was a really interesting one where they brought people in from a city and they asked them questions about dairy and found that they didn't know a lot about dairy. And then they asked them if they thought animals were cared for well in dairy farms. And the majority of them thought they did or were reasonably sure that they did. And then when they provided them the answers to the questions that they had asked them originally so that they were educated in ways of how dairy farming practices were run, more of them were actually concerned than believed that animals were well looked after. So it wasn't the lack of information, it was the lack of engagement on their concerns and explaining how we cater to their concerns.
So I suppose then just a final one, another interesting point you made was, shouting those good news stories, making sure people tell that. And coming from New Zealand yourself, what do you see the difference between the Irish story and maybe what's happening in New Zealand at the moment?
So the Irish story, well, New Zealand has had a massive increase in cow numbers and in the size of the industry over a very short period of time, which means that we've seen a massive change in our land use, and people are aware of that. So where they used to drive out into the countryside and see cereal fields and sheep, they see dairy farms, centre pivots, etc., things like that. And so there's a degree of concern, especially seeing as there's media that describe the alliteration of dirty dairying, which is an unfortunate term that got a lot of traction. And so, whereas in the Irish scenario, I think the Origin Green Standard has been fantastic right across the food production system as a label for Ireland, a double entendre on the national colour and the sustainability colour, and that has worked extremely well. We don't have an equivalent marketing strategy in New Zealand, but we're working hard to develop one.
John Roach there, speaking with Barry Cassidy. Stay with us. After this break, we're going on a farm walk.
Free with this week's Irish Farmers Journal, your essential guide to the ploughing. Our bumper 96-page magazine has everything you need, including a detailed site map, exhibitor list, all livestock, machinery and event programmes, as well as how to get there and where to park. The Irish Farmers Journal. This week, more than ever, you cannot afford to miss it.
The third Autumn Better Farm Walk took place on the farm of Sean Hayes in County Clare on Tuesday. Matthew Halpin and Adam Woods from our livestock team were there, and Matthew first asked Sean if the summer drought had a big impact on his farm.
No, I suppose lucky enough for us here in Clare, growth stopped. Well, where I am in East Clare now, growth stopped, alright, but we didn't get burnt. So the minute we got a bit of rain again, grass kicked on mighty, to be fair, and we've loads of grass here now at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, you have great covers, we'll say. Did you get to take out, how were you for fodder, we'll say, 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and we'll say, have you made up any deficits in the meantime?
Definitely, we were very tight there for a while. Second cut returned poor enough, but I suppose we're up. I took out 3 paddocks there 3 weeks ago, 70 bales and dash to another 25 bales another week, and another 60-70 bales in mid-jet. So we're flying it now, loads of fodder in the yard.
Yeah, and have you gone out with any fertiliser recently? Or
going constant, as paddocks are grazed, keep banging it out, yeah.
How's the response to that? Or?
Oh, mighty, yeah. You can see him, even Saturday evening I put out a few bags here around again. Sunday, Monday, you'd see places green up straight away, yeah.
I suppose we went through a couple of bits and pieces with your system and that on the farm here. One of the things was your split calving here. How are you finding that going?
Yeah, good. Yeah, we were all split calving, so I'm happy with it. I'm not going to change it from it. Going up the autumn numbers as much as I can now, try and get up to 30 cows. Look at build enough of grass early enough in the fall of the year, and that should hopefully carries on through fairly good.
I suppose some people might say, why not calve all the cows at once and get over and done with and have the one group? But so what's your reason for running a split calving?
Maybe a little bit more work, but to be fair, I wouldn't be able to carry the same cow numbers. There's the hope with the land type I have, a very heavy farm. This time last year, as I keep saying, we were in shit basically. Everywhere was outside farm, home farm, very wet, very torn up. So splitting the cabin numbers, it suits me perfect with where I'm going. Like.
And then I suppose just finally, you're gone from, we'll say, probably a Wainland system towards a bull beef system. Are you happy with the change?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Finding big responses. Happy with how it's going, and it seems to be working well for my system. Yeah.
And what was the reason, we'll say, for doing it? You mentioned probably, I suppose, getting the best from your stock, was it?
Yeah, it was. And look, at the good Wainlands, the top Wainlands were always paying fairly well in the March, but it was the second run of Wainlands where they might be back 100, 150 in the March. When I noticed and started feeding them, they definitely responded as good as the good Wainlands and caught up with them, and that's where I really saw where I was losing a lot of money back the years.
Sean, you've had a great walk here this evening, great attendance, I suppose. Thanks for opening up the farm for us, and best of luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Okay.
John, you're covering the Western and some of the Midlands participants of the Better Farm programme. I suppose it's been a challenging year on farms all over the country, but how have your participants got on in the West and the Midlands?
Yeah, I suppose to start off with the guys in the West, and particularly in the Northwest, they've gone on quite well. Like, you know, even up until last week, there's growth rates of maybe 80, 90 kilos of dry matter per hectare. To put it into context, I suppose the guys up in the real Northwest, up in Donegal, the Greaves, they cut their second cut silage last year on the 1st of September, with a lot of spoilage, obviously, given the wet conditions. This year they got it in on the 1st of July, and they since have their third cut in as well. So they're flying it up there. There doesn't seem to be, or there isn't any deficit at all really along the north-west coast. I suppose in the Midlands then, down around Kengilla, organic participant, and John Dunn, not too far from him in Port Arlington, I suppose they're under pressure. They're looking for rain. Second cuts aren't in. While they've bulked up, they haven't bulked up as much as they'd like. So they will be under pressure, and they'll probably go back again to our fodder budgets, and they will have to bridge the gap with something, be it meal or be it an alternative fodder crop going in, or forage crop, or restricting cows, something like that.
I suppose we're here on Sean Hayes' farm today. He's had a very good walk. We've seen that he's changing from maybe selling Wainlands originally, moving towards probably a finishing system. Do you think this is probably a blueprint? We'll say traditionally the West has probably been Wainland country, or selling Wainlands. Do you think a lot of the participants in the programme are possibly going to look at the bull finishing route?
Not so much the bull finishing route, but look, a lot of guys want to finish their own stock. In terms of, look, over the last two phases of the programme, the guys that were achieving €1,000 plus gross margin, consistently, they were proven to be the finishers, look, here on this farm, it was a no-brainer to go the bull route. Why? Because look, he's using the best sires there, the terminal sires, using very good maternal sires as well. And look, to silly, not to capitalise on the genetic potential of them animals.
Just as well as that, we'll say in the programme in general, this year there's obviously going to be fodder, probably hopefully surpluses on the farms in the West and in the Midlands. Going forward, is it something the programme is probably going to look at in regards factoring in a buffer into winter conservation plans for fodder going forward?
Yeah, but look, at the minute I suppose it's tough for guys. Look, they're trying to build stock numbers, and then they're being hit then, I suppose, in the back end. Back ends are coming quite wet, and hopefully it's not going to turn out that way this spring or this autumn. And then the springs, obviously the beast from the east last spring. Look, guys are definitely going to have to have a buffer there. So normally, look, in talking about the West here, you're probably talking about 5.5 month winter. This year, most of my guys, definitely a 6 month winter they're budgeting for. Guys down south, we were down with John McSweeney last week. He normally 4 months. He's obviously budgeting for 5 months. I think they have to, given the turbulent spell of weather and I suppose the way things are going in terms of climate change and whatnot. Look, we can't predict the weather, but look, if these guys, if they are going to carry more stock, they are going to have more feed.
Finally, I suppose just to finish up on Sean, we're here on Sean's farm and Sean's system. We heard, look, he's losing rented land and he's hoping to keep up performance going forward. He's going over to a bull finishing route. It's worked out well from so far. Are you confident Sean's going to meet his targets by the end of the programme?
I am, yeah. Look, it's not often you get a Galway man and a Clare man singing off the same hymn sheet. But look, if we make as much, I suppose, progress as we have in the last 18 months over the next year or two, I've no doubt he will. Look, the groundwork is done. Over the last couple of years, in the last phase or two, look, consistently it's been shown that grassland management, animal performance, and stocking rate are the three key drivers of profitability. So look, the animal performance is there. I know Sean's animals can perform. They're bred to perform. He's got a good vaccination program in place. Herd health is good. It's the grassland we're worried about. Okay, so 40 acres have been dropped. We're going to carry more more stock. So similarly to worrying about the winter feed, we're going to have to worry about feeding them animals that grass as well. So coming back to our soil fertility, our P's and K's, our pH. Sean's farm last year grew just shy of 8 tonne. Look, if he wants to carry the stocking rate at 2.5 livestock units per hectare, he's going to have to grow maybe 12, 14 tonne.
So I'm here with Nigel O'Kane at Sean Hayes' walk in Tullow, County Clare. Nigel is the Galway Better Farm participating in the Teagasc Irish Farmers Journal Better Beef Challenge. Nigel, I suppose it's been 2 months since you were on your farm for your open day on the 19th of July. You were just starting to turn the corner at that point in terms of coming out of a drought. How did it finish up in terms of, did it come good?
Yeah, it came very good. Grass fairly took off after that. I think I was able to take out a few paddocks for silage. We got a third cut as well recently there, which averaged nearly 10 bales the acre. Albeit there's probably a good bit of effluent coming out of it.
So in terms of fodder for this winter, you're fairly sorted now?
I'm 100% fodder needs, yeah.
Those fields that we'll say got nitrogen, we'll say during the drought, and once the rain came, they were just starting to turn when we were there. How did that go in terms of, did it really, we'll say, push on after that?
Yeah, they took off. Now, once the grass got above the 4 centimetres, 5 centimetres, it absolutely exploded out of the ground. And there was a turnaround, I think, of about maybe 15, 16 days of a regraze. So it just, and even up until now, there's still heat in the ground. Now we've had plenty of rain and probably too much rain at the minute, but the grass is still fairly grown. Even after cutting silage there last Wednesday, you could nearly put cattle in grazing in 2 or 3 days' time. You know, It's coming that fast again.
You had some forward Frisian steers there when we were there. I suppose you were in a sort of deliberating as what you were going to do with those. What happened then?
I still have some of them. I sold some of them live there about 2 weeks ago in the market because I needed to pay for silage and a silage contractor and things like that. They averaged 180 to 190 a kilo.
Not so bad.
I also sold some forward store heifers. They averaged 250 a kilo, but they were probably U-grade heifers, you know, so
okay.
They were probably the better of the ones that I had.
In terms of jobs for the next 4 weeks, has weaning started on your farm, or what are you concentrating on at the moment on the farm?
Yeah, I have a herd test now in 2 weeks' time, so I'm going to start weaning off any of the cull cows, any cows that are not in calf. I'm going to scan as well, and I had a few that I'd never AI'd, so they will be gotten rid of.
And in terms of, I suppose, creep feeding, have you started to creep ahead of weaning, or do you do that?
I had been creep feeding the weanlings with the creep feeder while the grass was short, but I kind of cut it out there the last while because they're being moved every day and I just didn't have the time to move the creep feeder all the time.
Yeah.
But I do try. I raise the fence on just with 2 posts and let the calves on ahead, and they generally go there all the time. Yeah.
And in terms of closing up, I suppose, to try and get early grass for next spring, when will you start to close paddocks on your farm in Galway?
I'll be closing from now, really. You know, the next week or so. Anything that's been grazed now, I doubt will be grazed again. You know, that's more than likely that's the way it'll be.
And you've just heard host farmer Sean Hayes, Better Farm Programme Advisor John Greeny, and another participating farmer, Nigel O'Kane, with Matthew Halpin and Adam Woods. Last week, Teagasc published its annual report, and Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Hannah Quinn Mulligan went along to talk to its director Jerry Boyle. She started by asking him about Teagasc's assessment of the fodder situation.
The real problem has been in the southeast generally, in that general hinterland of the southeast. It's been like a different planet altogether.
And that would be traditionally the place that produces a lot of fodder, and especially straw for the rest of the country.
Well, I think that's one of the points. The fodder situation has led to an equal concern around availability of bedding, and it's understandable we focus on the actual feed aspect, but the bedding is a critical issue, something we're looking at. So obviously things have improved everywhere, but and the most obvious manifestation is that, I'd say, most farmers now are no longer having to buy feed for the last couple of weeks. Hopefully that's the case generally, but of course there's a number of them that have no chance of actually being able to have a second cut even of silage, let alone a third cut. So they're obviously looking at how they're going to feed over the winter.
You mentioned as well buying feed there, and cash flows turning into a huge problem on farms. Does Teagasc have any indication of say, this time this year compared to this time last year?
It's obvious it's much worse because people have been, feeding for maybe 3 months now, in most cases, and that's all money flowing out. The only saving grace is that in the dairy sector, that milk prices have held up. Now, we still reckon that basically last year was a high in terms of income on dairy farms. You're going to have at least a 50% drop this year, so it's very evident cash flow is severely will be under severe pressure. We will be reactivating a very successful campaign we had a couple of years ago around cash flow. And again, the message is very, very simple. The first thing farmer needs to do, whether it's a fodder situation or cash, is establish their own situation. So we've developed a 5-minute cash flow analysis that no matter what, whether you're a farmer or non-farmer, I think it's worth doing anyway. So that's the first thing we're saying to people. Look, take stock. Things mightn't be as bad as you think. But the first thing you need to do is look at your situation and be realistic about what's possible here. And cash is very tight and is going to have to be conserved.
The other thing, and maybe it's more of a good news story, was the number of distance education green certs had increased for 2017 compared to other years. And you mentioned as well that when the economy is doing well, it has a knock-on effect and fewer people are going into doing agricultural courses. Does this mean that the age makeup or range in agricultural colleges is changing? Have you got more mature students doing kind of distance courses and coming back to farms?
Yeah, well, I suppose the way it works is that most of the people doing the part-time course at the distance ed, they do them in a regional centre, so they don't actually study in our colleges. Some colleges would provide practical courses, so the more mature student tends to not go to the colleges. So the colleges are typically school leavers. We're at the maximum in terms of our capability for handling the part-time students in distance ed. There's a big waiting list behind that.
Do we have any numbers on the waiting list?
I'd say we had about 400 last year in the regular part-time program, about 1,000 or more in the distance ed. I'd say there's a couple of thousand certainly that are waiting for places, definitely. Now and we're trying to work through those. There's obviously a capacity.
Is it a matter of funding? Do you need more funding for more courses, or putting more courses available?
It's really it's capacity. Mainly in terms of space at this stage. We have a capacity problem to some extent in terms of teachers. We had a difficulty a couple of years ago when we managed to, the minister permitted us to take on additional contract staff. That's alleviated the situation now. Those contracts are coming to conclusion shortly. And we'll have to see whether we can persuade the minister again that there's still a backlog. And it was really prompted by, it goes back to the measures that were brought in under the Rural Development Programme of the Common Agricultural Policy. It incentivise people to get the education and qualification. So there's a big challenge in the northeast of the country. For whatever reason, it seems to be a big demand area there, and we certainly are we're going to need to renew some of the contract staff definitely.
And when do those contracts?
About a year, within a year or so, So we need to plan in advance, obviously. So that's something we'll be looking to.
Jerry Boyle of Teagasc with Hannah Quinn Mulligan there. Now, we're just days away from the National Ploughing Championships, where the best ploughmen and women in Ireland will compete. Anne O'Donoghue met one of them for this week's Irish Country Living, European Reversible Ploughing champion Liam O'Driscoll. He told her about the difference between the conventional and reversible classes in the competition.
Totally different job to do
compared
to the conventional. Now you have to plough into the short angle and come in square again. Compared to the conventional, you're ploughing a square plat. Mm-hmm. In the reversible, you're ploughing a plat that's shorter on one side than the other. Mm-hmm. So that's the difference of the two.
When you're doing it like yourself, what would be the adjustments you'd be making to the plough as you're going along, kind of?
Sure, it's different every day.
Okay, it depends
on the size and the
mm-hmm.
plat and how level the plat is. If there's a side fall, that'll upset your set as well. But ideally, if you had a flat, level plat, it's one set job, then just go in one side and out the other.
And do you use a hydraulic top link?
I have, yeah. I have 7 hydraulic adjustments in the plough, so no shortage of adjustments.
And is ploughing is a very technical job to do, is it?
It is, yeah. There's a lot of measuring, and there's a lot of accuracy, and you have to be a good driver as well on top of all that in order to bring it in. Like when you're finishing, you're bringing it into less than 1/4 inch, and the flat is 100 metres long, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of measuring and accuracy involved there.
And is it just does the eye just get used to it over time?
Yeah, it's all practice. The more practice you do, the better you get. Yeah.
And you're as a family, I gather you've been fairly successful in the ploughing.
Yeah, over the years, yeah. My father ploughed, and he's ploughing nearly 50 years.
See, and is he still ploughing?
He's ploughing this year in Ireland, yeah. And my brothers, they all ploughed as well. And my sister-in-law's ploughing as well this year in Ireland. So.
Did your father teach you how to plough?
He did, yeah. I was following him since I was very small. So
yeah.
I was learning from him all the time. Yeah.
So I suppose, like, you kind of pick it up as you go along, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It was an early start, like, but it paid in the long run.
And when did you start competition ploughing?
1999. I ploughed in Castleton Roach, and I came second that year in the senior.
Not too bad.
Good start.
And if the soil was particularly wet at the match, is there anything you can do, or is it just?
So no, it kind of suits me. Anytime it's wet, it seems
really?
to go better. Yeah.
And is that just kind of the way it happens, or is it?
Yeah, some ploughmen would say that if it was like last year now on the Wednesday, it was desperate. But I was the best in the stubble that day, so it kind of suits.
Finally, let's join Peter Varley, who attended the Hill Sheep Farming Forum in Westport, County Mayo on Monday. There, he asked the IFA's Hill Sheep chairman, Flor McCarthy, about the main issues facing his sector at the moment.
About within IFA, I deal with all the issues that affect mainly in the designated areas and the hill areas, which are mainly in the west of Ireland, but not exclusively in the west. There's parts of Wicklow and Waterford, also hill areas. About the big issue at the moment, and that we want delivery in the budget, we raised it with Minister Ring this evening, is the walk scheme. It is a very successful scheme. There has been 2 million delivered since about 2008 to farmers. We've been promised since Phil Hogan's time, Minister Phil Hogan, that it would be doubled. And there was a commitment in the programme for government to double the scheme to 4 million. So we impressed here this evening at our Hill Forum in Westport that the importance of doubling that scheme to 4 million, and Minister Ring said he will be back to us before the end of the year. I also have raised the issue previously with him in a direct meeting, is that the cuts that took place to the people that are in the scheme have to also be restored. We also raised the insurance issue, which is a major issue now because of the increase in tourism numbers year on year for all individual farmers, and we stressed it here publicly today in front of the Minister that it has to be a broad scheme that covers all farmers for all the issues that can arise when they come on, and he acknowledged it strongly in his own address, but acknowledging and action, and that's what I clearly have stressed with the Minister today, is that we need to see action in the budget in October.
Sorry, and there was a lot of calls for a payment, especially bespoke for hill sheep farmers. Farmers were calling on a payment of up to €15, €20 per head. How realistic do you think those calls are?
Well, I can see where they're coming from. Even though I'm a hill sheep farmer myself, I rang around the number of my committee on Friday. The price of the store lamb, it's a combination of the route in the east. There isn't the same demand for the store lamb, but that isn't the only issue. There's an issue every year with the small lamb. There are too long a term projects. It's the same as the light weanlings at the moment. There are hard animals to dispose of. We are providing a different type of farming. A lot of farmers that are in the hills may not realise we're providing environmental goods. The tourists are coming to our regions. So I think we will have to look, and just came across strongly here tonight, that we need to look for €25. You rightly say, how realistic is this? I think that it's realistic to get up to, the numbers are going to drop. We're farming very sensitive land, and the walk scheme, for all it's good, is only going to benefit a small number of farmers. But what's going to keep people in these regions is a combination of payments, and maybe some people for putting sheep on the hills. definitely down the road it will happen. There will be bigger payments because the hill sheep, they're producing a lamb, and they're the only sheep that actually will live on these hills. That's the problem we have. We can't substitute them, so there will have to be a bigger payment to keep them on the hills.
So it'll be a public good more than anything.
It's a public goods payment, strongly, and it will take a while to we as farmers realise that we are contributing a lot of public goods, and maybe it's like for the state's benefit and for even board fault and all the tourism boards, they also have to realise there has to be something in it for us, because we're keeping the countryside farmed, the national parks, the land that's owned by the state is need managed, and the cost of managing that land is excessive. So there's no cheaper way of getting it managed than supporting the people that are doing it. But it has to happen in time. And both for me, I'm incoming hill chairman since January. The challenge for me is to be able to keep these issues to the fore within an idea and also within government.
That's our lot for this week. As always, you can read more about all these stories in this week's paper on the Irish Farmers Journal app and at farmersjournal.ie. If you're on Spotify, you can search for Irish Farmers Journal and listen to this podcast directly in the app every week. Our sound engineer was Ferdia Mooney. From me, Thomas Hubert, goodbye, and talk to you live from the ploughing next week.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.